This is the Troutbitten Podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout.
This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten Podcast. Welcome back, friends, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swintowski, and I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com. So here we are, starting season 4 of the podcast, and this time it's another Troutbitten skills series. Just like season 2, this season of episodes is tightly focused on one topic. While season 2 featured the 9 essential skills for tight line and Euro nymphing, here with season 4, we're ready to take on the 3 styles of dry dropper. That's our topic. Again, these are connected episodes that build out the various styles of dry dropper fishing. This first episode is an overview of the 3 styles, and it sets up some of the reasons we like to fish dry dropper in the first place. Remember, these episodes are short, deeply tactical, and packed with the how-tos of these various styles. It's a different format than what we've done for seasons 1 and 3 with my full panel of friends. So, we'll get to all the dry dropper stuff in a minute, but first, an introduction. For this skills series, I'm joined again by my good friend, Austin Dando. How's it going, bud?
Oh, it's going good, friend. Good to be back.
Yeah, I know. I said it feels a little weird.
It does feel weird, but it feels familiar at the same time.
Familiar, and yet a bit distant. It's been like, 5 weeks or something?
Yeah, since the last episode. It's only been like 5 days since I last saw you, though.
Right. So Austin and I just returned a few days ago from our family beach vacations, right?
Yeah, somehow.
Independently.
Right. Not planned.
Little did I know you were vacationing the same week and only about an hour away. I was surprised. You're like, it's only an hour. I said, it has to be more than that, but it wasn't. Hour and 10 maybe.
Yeah.
So we fished together. That was cool. We didn't catch anything. Apart.
No, but you almost did at the very end, and I almost did at the very end.
We had our shots. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're both rookies in the salt.
By almost, I thought that the seaweed was a fish. But it indeed was seaweed. But if nothing else, I got you excited for a moment.
Right. It was good.
I think.
It was a good 2 seconds of weight on the end of the line that looked like it might have been bouncing.
Yep.
I finished strong, though. At the end of my week, I started dialing in the fluke on the bucktails. That was fun, dude.
That is cool.
You got to come over and join me.
I lucked out the first day.
Oh, yeah.
I fished a fly rod because I was stubborn. I caught a bluefish on the first day. I thought, all right, I can figure this out. It's only going to get better from here. And, it only got worse from there. Yeah. But that's all I needed. If I didn't catch one the first day, I might have been less inclined to keep going out the rest of those days. So
I hear that.
It happened for a reason.
But how many other things did you do? How many other sports or activities did you fit in over the week?
Oh, man. My family kept me busy. We
surfed?
We did surf. Well, we could try to call it surfing. We rode the little breaks that exist in New Jersey Beach. We did, my wife did some incredible sand sculpting, and I provided the buckets of water and the mounds of sand. You could call that an activity.
That's an activity.
Lots of running, lots of biking. Got kicked off a tennis court because we didn't know you had to pay for it.
Huh. So you tried to play
over
tennis?
The loudspeaker. Yeah. We tried to play tennis around all these people. And all of a sudden, the loudspeaker turns on. The place is packed. They got like 15 courts. And you go, Court 8, you did not pay for this court. You need to leave. And everybody stops. Yeah. Everybody stops and looks over at us. And this little kid next to us goes, it's $12 an hour. We're like, all right, we're getting out of here.
Did they give you a chance to pay, or did they just kick you out?
We tried.
Say never come back.
We tried, but of course it's cash only, like everything else at the beach. So we just left.
They probably thought thieves are thieves. Forget these guys.
Right.
So if you'd have done one thing, dude, I do one thing when I go to the beach. I fish, right? Morning, night, fish.
Yep. Becky's
pretty tolerant. The boys love it.
That's good. That's what it takes.
It works.
Grab a kid. Go fishing. It seemed like they really caught the sharks. I know last year they were focused on shark catching, right? You had mentioned, and you're hoping that they may not catch a shark because you didn't know what to do with it or didn't want to deal with it. Sounds like they caught a lot.
Right. Joey caught a nice sized stingray, which is another thing I didn't want to have to deal with, but I wasn't there when he caught it. He did quite a bit of independent fishing on the bay side, which is cool.
Nice.
Yeah, he got into sharks too, like small sharks, They'll have 3 feet and smaller, which is,
I mean,
it's still a
3
shark.
feet sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, I have no interest in that.
Yeah.
I don't want to catch the sharks. Catch them
That's
fluke,
fair.
mostly fluke. Going for striper. You coming in the fall? We going?
I would love to go. You tell me when.
Oh, there we go. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
All right. So just like season 2, we're here to keep things tactical. So we better shut up, right? And as much as we like talking and hanging out, we're going to keep these episodes tightly focused on the dry dropper styles. That's our topic. And you ready to be serious, bud?
I'm ready to be serious, guy.
No goofing around. All right, so adding a nymph to a dry fly rig just produces fish. And you can throw a nymph under a dry fly and start casting, right? But in my world, there are 3 distinct styles of dry dropper fishing. And within each of these types, the elements of fly, nymph, and leader are arranged, balanced, and modified toward unique objectives. Who doesn't like fishing with dry flies, right? Seriously, who doesn't enjoy the visual feedback of watching a dry fly slide down the edge of a current seam, gloriously in pace with the bubbles on the surface? And when the head of a brown and gold torpedo rushes to the fly, emerging from the darkest water, that anticipation and satisfaction is unmatched in this river game. Love it. Dry flies are the heart and soul of fly fishing. And while I love fishing nymphs and streamers underneath, I still take every chance I get to tie on a floater. But here's the thing. For the year-round trout angler, most days do not offer great dry fly fishing. Many guys stick with it anyway, of course, and they try to force the trout into some agreement. But while lazy trout are often convinced with a well-placed nymph, most wild trout are not easily persuaded to the surface if they're not already in that mood. So why not offer a nymph to the trout at the same time as we fish a dry? Sounds perfect, right? Sure it does. But in most cases, adding a nymph affects the drift of the dry. It changes things. Worse yet, the weight of the add-on nymph can take away the enjoyment of casting dries in the first place. And so everything does change, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so, I argue, there are 3 styles of dry dropper fishing. And when I break it down for my guided guests this way, they fall in love with the idea because it makes sense. The angler first decides what elements are most important, not just for fooling fish, but for their own enjoyment too. Then they choose whatever style of dry dropper suits the moment. These 3 styles of dry dropper, as I refer to them, are light dry dropper, standard dry dropper, or bobber dry dropper, as we sometimes call it, and tightline dry dropper. Now, what I just worked through are the introductory paragraphs from an article on Troutbitten titled 3 Styles of Dry Dropper. That's right. In February of 2019, I published the first in a series of 4 articles on the Troutbitten website that detail these dry dropper styles. I finished that series a few months later, and those articles have been on the website ever since. It's a popular set of articles that might make a nice compact book someday, with a few additions. But we're ready to put a little more meat on those bones with this dry dropper skills series. Just remember that the framework is already there, laid out and supported by hundreds more articles on Troutbitten. So if you enjoy this conversation, follow the links that I'll leave in the show notes, or just Google Troutbitten 3 Styles of Dry Dropper. That'll get you there. All right, Austin, let's start this. All right, let's get it going.
All right.
Why do you like to fish dry dropper? What do you think? What's your reason?
It's just fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's different because you can do a lot of things at once to some degree. You can cover water in an efficient way often, and you can also offer 2 food forms at one time, which is pretty different, especially considering one food form above the water and one food form below the water. Yeah. You know?
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And it's just a way that I like to almost break routine sometimes. You know, we get... we look at sighters so much, we fish streamers so much underwater, we don't see our flies a lot. And it is fun to kind of combine the flies you can't see with the fly that you can see. And, you know, just do something different.
Yeah, that is what makes it exciting. That visual aspect.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, everybody loves fishing dries. But then you can find yourself fishing those dries for hours on end, and you're getting nothing. You're not even getting the looks.
Right.
And you might change flies, but really, if they're going to eat it, you're going to get some kind of looks. You know what I mean? If you have a reasonable fly on. It's not until I start to get refusals that I'll say, all right, change flies. Usually I'll try to do, like you said, try to cover a lot of water. And if they start refusing it, then I'll try to dial things in. But yeah, man, I mean, everybody loves fishing dries, so why not add that nymph, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It can be efficient. It can be a really efficient, a lot of times, on new water.
That's a good point.
Or if I want to cover a lot, right? Just to kind of see what's in there.
Yeah.
Up top, underneath, 2 options.
Right. And I like it because I don't have to spend a lot of time in one area, or that's the way I fish it at least. And that's why I consider it to be efficient. I'll cast into 1 or 2 seams upstream of me, or however it may be presented, and I'll give those trout a fair chance, and then I'll move up and I'll cast into the next set of seams. I'm often not standing there repeatedly casting a dry dropper rig over and over again.
Yeah, and it's an exploring type of rig, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Right.
And I'll do that with streamers too. I'll fish dry dropper a little bit slower as far as covering water, a little bit slower. Maybe I will give them 2 or 3 looks instead of just like 1 or 2 looks with a streamer.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's a good comparison.
It makes sense. Sometimes trout will even go for this on the splat of a dry fly, if you're splatting it down, or as soon as it touches, whether it splats or not. You do have those fish that are just looking up. So that drift, if it's affected by the nymph, sometimes doesn't even matter. Because there's no time to drift. It's just bam, they hit it. Of course, they'll do the same thing on the drop with the nymph,
Yep.
So it all sounds really good, right? It sounds great.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are some consequences. We'll get to that. It's not perfect by any means.
No.
Especially if you don't really think through, well, the way I like to think about it, these 3 styles. If you don't really have, let's say, objectives, and you're not prioritizing one or the other, and thinking that you're going to get great drifts on both, it might be a mistake,
Yeah. The dry dropper rig, whether it be one of the 3 styles, I often find myself fishing it because it solves a problem for me. Sure, I'll go to it to prospect with on occasion, but more often than not, I'm switching to it because of a water type that I'm in. And we'll get into this too, whether or not we're fishing the dry or the nymph primarily, but if I'm fishing shallow water and it's clear and fish are rising, but sporadically, the chances are decent that they're going to take a dry, but I have to stay at a distance and maybe have a mono rig on even. I like to go to that dry dropper rig and solely fish those 2 flies together. And especially on a mono rig, it'll allow me some extra distance and some more stealth on my behalf. I really do like fishing them in lower, clearer conditions. Because it becomes hard to do sometimes only nymphing, or, a dry fly is great, but what if they're not actively eating the dry fly in those low conditions? So it's kind of, it is more problem solver for me.
I like what you say there about it being a problem solver. That's a really good point. If you combine all 3 of these styles, and they're dramatically different, we're going to get to that. Your light dry dropper, your standard dry dropper, and your tight line dry dropper are very, very different. And what you were just talking about there, often I'll run a tight line dry dropper because I was tight line nymphing, and then I throw the dry fly up there. We're going to get to all of this, we promise. That's a fantastic way to solve some problems.
Right on.
Other times, I was doing it this morning. I was just fishing dries. I love fishing dries this time of year. Yeah. And toward, I'm going to say about 10 o'clock in the morning, they really started slowing down. They were getting picky. And maybe because this was on my mind that we were going to talk about this, I just threw 12 inches back. I threw a soft tackle, just like a peacock hurl and some soft tackle, very simple. But it could look buggy, it could look like an ant, I suppose, it's dark.
Right.
And it was like a size 16, and it did not affect my cast. And I mean, it was small, it was light. So I was fishing light dry dropper at distance. There's no way in the water. I was purposely fishing really shallow. Lots of stuff is shallow, but I was fishing upstream, almost toward the headwaters, and just kind of challenging myself and seeing if I could fish some really skinny stuff. So I was not going to be tight lining, really.
That's cool.
I couldn't really get close enough. I was going to spook them if I got that close.
Yeah.
So it's cool. That was a problem solver in a different way, and it worked. Worked a couple times, then I got out of there because they really do seem to shut down late morning.
Yeah. And that's a fantastic point. If there's transition periods within the morning or within the afternoon and you just want to go prospect underneath if you're already on top, there's so many different ways and reasons to go there.
Yeah. And when you combine all three styles, you have a lot of options and variations. Hell, I guess you could spend all day fishing dry dropper and really meet the trout on their own terms by changing up which style you're doing, how you're doing it. I'll mention, too, that one thing that really attracts me to dry dropper is when I do think that they will eat both flies. If I feel like I got a great, or at least a good chance, or maybe even some chance on that dry, I'll use a dry fly instead of an Indie up top. You know.
Right on.
Whether it's after a fishing trip or at a backyard fire, you can bet the Troutbitten crew has a case of New Trail Broken Heels along with us. It's honestly our favorite beer. This hazy IPA is smooth and full-bodied. Hand-selected Citra hops lead to notes of bright clementine and juicy ruby red grapefruit. Broken Heels is a keeper. New Trail beer is proudly brewed in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and delivered cold to your favorite craft beer retailer every week. At New Trail, it's not about being the best angler. It's about getting out there. So enjoy nature's moments and reward yourself for a day well fished with New Trail Broken Heels. It's Troutbitten's favorite beer. Precision Fly and Tackle is a family-owned business with a passion for the outdoors and a sense of adventure. They are anglers who enjoy every moment spent on the water with family and friends. Precision Fly and Tackle carries the widest selection of Euro rods, reels, lines, leaders, flies, and accessories. From the beginner to the advanced angler, Precision Fly and Tackle can outfit every angler, no matter the budget. Visit them online at precisionflyandtackle.com. Then use code TROUTBITTEN10, that's the number 10, for 10% off your order. Gear up with Precision Fly and Tackle for your next adventure. All right, so we've already seen from our discussion that there are some downsides to fishing dry dropper. And I remember even after years of doing it, I always felt like I wasn't fishing either fly very well. The dry fly often had visible drag, and the nymph usually wasn't deep enough or it just wasn't drifting the right way. And I could tell. And it wasn't until I finally started to think a little harder about things, when I really began to consider my objectives and how to get good drifts, that I started having any success with dry dropper. Eventually, I realized that there really are three distinctly different ways to fish this dry dropper style. And sometimes the dry fly is the priority, while at other times it's more about fishing the nymph. That's really a good place to start, right? I'd argue that it's impossible to fish both flies perfectly. You can fish them well. That's what we're trying to do a lot of times. But to fish them perfectly, probably not. So which fly do you really want to focus on? Are you nymphing, or are you trying to get great drifts on a dry fly that the trout should eat? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And I think maybe the word to describe it is compromise. So, we have the dry, we have the nymph.
Yeah.
And one of those two is going to take the driver's seat, and one of them is going to kind of sit in the back.
Nice.
And we either are going to focus, depending on the situation, depending on the food forms available, whatever the trout tell us to do, we're going to offer to the best of our ability one of those and sort of compromise a little bit on the second offering.
Perfect. Yeah, don't think that you're really going to be able to do both in the best way, right?
Exactly, in the best way.
So we're talking about three styles here. Again, they are light dry dropper, bobber dry dropper, or standard for you elitists, and tight line dry dropper. Are you an elitist, Austin?
I am at the ocean, I guess.
That's a good point. Austin was only fly fishing. But man, when I go to the surf, I'm just spin fishing. I'm on it, and I love it. But no, not Austin.
Thank goodness I had my stripping basket. My Tupperware on a belt.
Did you make that yourself?
Oh, yeah. What do you mean? Did I make that myself?
You can buy it.
Yeah.
I figured if you were a real elitist, you would have bought like a Sims stripping basket.
Well, you can't buy my custom ones.
Right. Not yet.
Yeah, we're working on it.
All right. And so, there's some crossover within these styles too. We acknowledge that. But by and large, these are very different ways to approach things. And it helps tremendously to think through these various ways of rigging and presenting the dry and the nymph. Then you can sort through your goals, assess the situation, and make a good choice. Now, The next 3 episodes of this season will take each one of these styles and break them down thoroughly. We'll go through leaders, flies, and the approach for all of them. But right now, let's briefly introduce these 3 different styles of dry dropper. Austin, you want to start with light dry dropper?
Yeah, sure. So when we think about light dry dropper, we're primarily focused on the dry fly. And our leader is built for the dry. There's minimal impact on the drift of the dry from the nymph.
Yeah.
And our primary focus, the front seat, the driver's seat, is going to be the dry fly.
Nice.
The other nice thing about the light dry dropper is it probably feels the most similar to a traditional cast.
Good point.
So if we're fishing a regular fly line, standard fly line, when we're casting that rig, we're not really going to feel the tug of the weight of the nymph on that setup. If we are, it means we're doing something off balance there.
Yeah.
But primarily, it's going to feel very similar to just fishing a single dry.
That's the thing, right? I mean, you keep the weight very minimal, like you said.
Yeah.
For me, I'm gonna say 5 centigrams. If you're more than 10 centigrams, you are going to feel that weight. And we're going to talk about what happens when you add that weight, but, well, it changes everything.
Yeah.
The idea with this light dry dropper, like you said, it really shouldn't change. It shouldn't affect the great drifts that we get on a dry fly.
Right on.
And, well, for us, I know that, I mean, you fish over these trout. These trout will not permit drag. It's rare.
Yeah.
Okay, like, I get it. There are different trout, different parts of the world.
Right.
Will be a little more generous, a little more forgiving. Or maybe they're even attracted by drag and skitter in the fly.
Yep.
That doesn't work very often here.
No.
And there are a lot of places that are tough like this. And so into our dry fly approach, into our leader, really, we build S-curves and slack. And as soon as the slack is gone on the surface and you're literally tight then to your drag happens.
Right.
And that's when the fish they're not going to eat it usually, right?
Yep.
And so if you add weight, well, that drag sets in a lot sooner because it takes out the slack that you're able to build in with a good cast.
Yeah, excellent.
You use a Harvey leader for most of your
I do.
dry work?
Yep. Yeah, I build it right off
so
the
you're
Harvey
staying
leader.
with that then with the light dry dropper.
Exactly. Yep. And it's a way that I can fish a dry fly if I really want to do that. And let's say that the action on top is slow, and I can still give it a second option and feel good about that. You know, it boosts the confidence if the the dry fly eats aren't going on.
Right on. So I mean, we'll acknowledge too, we're not trying to get real deep with this. We're not trying to get to the bottom of the river with light dry dropper.
Yep.
You're just looking for fish that maybe won't come all the way up to the top.
Yep.
But they'll go a little bit underneath, right?
Right.
That's about it. I mean, we're going to get into in depth. We're going to get in depth on light dry dropper in the very next episode. But I'll say too, I use dry flies that the trout are going to eat. I don't have to use special dry flies to suspend a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm.
Don't change much. You know, today I was fishing that ant, and then I just threw a size 16 hurl and hackle underneath.
Nice.
And it didn't change anything. You know,
Did they eat it?
I really didn't feel. They did eat it. They ate it twice.
That feels good.
Home.
That's enough. That's enough
It
times.
did, right? It's enough. Because once is lucky, and 2 is a little bit of a trend.
A little different.
But it didn't change my cast. It didn't change the way I was able to poke it under the trees with slack. I got great drifts on the dry. They still were picky about that. But yeah, 2 of them within, let's say, 15 minutes went ahead and ate that little soft tackle.
Cool.
It could be a little bead head, but boy, not much. And usually a brass bead.
Yep.
Again, 5 centigrams, man. That's what you want to aim for. Anything more, it's going to change things. And then you're kind of into the next style.
Yeah.
Which is standard dry dropper, or we sometimes call it bobber dry dropper.
There you go.
Because that's essentially what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're going to indicator fish, but now your dry fly is the indie, right?
Hopper dropper.
Hopper dropper, a lot of times, right? I mean, there's different things about hopper dropper too, and maybe that's its own style.
That was the Hank Patterson.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
He had a good one. Yes.
Yeah, I always think about that.
Hopper dropper. What was it? Hopper
Yeah, it
dropper?
was some sort of conglomerate of those.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hank Patterson.
Yeah.
Your fly fishing guide.
That's right. Wow. It's been a while.
I do think standard dry dropper, or bobber dry dropper as we often call it, is the most common. It is what people think of. I do think hopper dropper fits into this category.
Absolutely.
Again, we're using the dry fly as an indie. And here's the thing, with the light dry dropper, we're focused on the dry, as we said.
Yeah.
As soon as I kind of admit to myself that I'm using standard dry dropper, not like in a bad way, I just mean like, okay, this is what I'm doing.
Yep.
Then I kind of submit or resign myself to, all right, I'm not going to get great drifts on the dry. I'm going to try.
Yeah.
But now I'm nymphing. Now I'm going to focus on trying to get those great drifts on the nymph.
And what you just said there too is you realize at some point there's a shift in what you're doing. I think that's really important, because if we don't realize that, if we don't submit, as you said, we end up trying to do something in between, and we end up fishing neither fly very well at all for a sustained amount of time. And we get frustrated. We think, this dry dropper stuff, this is all, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I think that's an excellent point, to realize what you're doing and when you need to change. And when you realize you need to change, go ahead and do that.
Yeah, sure. What we're talking through here is different ways to have a plan to do that and to know the changes to make.
Yeah.
Just like you say, recognize what you're doing. I kind of fished like you said for many years. I mean, I wasn't getting great drifts on either one. I was frustrated, and I just did what I thought you were supposed to do. Just throw the nymph underneath, and it destroyed my my dry fly drift.
Right.
Yeah.
And I bet that's incredibly common too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You might be getting great drifts on the dry, and then all of a sudden, if you add, again, like 10, 15 centigrams, or God forbid you throw a stonefly under there, you have 45 or 50 centigrams or more. Boy, that's just going to change everything.
Yeah.
It changes the cast. It changes the way the whole delivery is. I'll say, when I'm fishing standard dry dropper here, I do a lot of mending. Again, I resign myself that that's how I'm going to keep the tension off of the dry. And then you have to change your angles too. I like to fish upstream a lot.
Yep.
But when I'm doing standard dry dropper, I often am fishing at 45-degree angles or even straight across, because I plan on doing those, well, I call them hop mends usually.
Yep.
But just recognizing you're not going to get perfect drift. No matter what you do, you're not going to get those perfect drifts anymore. Yeah. That might be okay. They're still going to eat the dry, or else I wouldn't be doing it. I'd just throw an Indy.
And again, just right there. We're still going to fish flies on the surface that they may take. They may be less likely to take it in some scenarios. But if we're going to fish dry dropper, it's not because we just need something to float a nymph. Now, we have different ways, better ways to do that when the conditions demand it. But if we have the chance to catch one on top, then that's the reason we fish that. Yeah,
for sure. And if you are in an area where they will take stimulators and hoppers, great. That must be fun. Big salmon flies and whatnot. That's great. But around here, man, if you throw a size 6 salmon fly or something like that, or a big old stimulator, they're not eating it.
Yeah, it's just a bopper. True bopper.
It is. And that's all right. I mean, but why not really throw a yarn Indy on there that is adjustable in many ways, or a thingamabobber that's, again, adjustable, slide it up and down.
Yep.
If it isn't an advantage, I don't do it usually. Anything else on a standard? I mean, we're going to, again, episode 3 will be about standard dry dropper, but that's an overview. We get it.
That's great.
That's definitely the most common one. It's a nymphing style, right?
Yep.
It's not a dry fly style as much as a nymphing style, and yet you're going to catch them on the dry. That's an added bonus.
Tactical Fly Fisher was started in 2015 by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson, with a mission to bring American anglers the techniques and gear that dominate the international competitive fly fishing scene. While you may have no desire to compete, you can still benefit from the same strategies which competitive anglers use to make them more successful on the water. Whether you want to buy a Euro nymphing rod, a stillwater fly line, or just some hooks and beads to fill your fly box, we've got you covered. And our teaching materials will help you learn how to use whatever products fill up your cart. Head on over to thetacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TFF10 to get 10% off flies, fly tying supplies, or terminal tackle.
Since 2010, Smith Creek, New Zealand has provided innovative, high-quality angling solutions designed to free up your hands, keep your gear in easy reach, and keep our waters clean. Smith Creek's award-winning rod clip attaches to your vest and grips a variety of rod sizes, freeing up your hands to tie a fly, change a hook, or release your catch. All Smith Creek products are built guide tough, using high-quality materials like anodized marine-grade aluminum, non-corrosive fasteners, and UV-resistant nylon. To learn more about other innovative products, such as the patented net holster, spent line wrangler, or rod rack, visit smithcreek.co. That's smithcreek.co. So what about tight line dry dropper?
Yeah.
I know you do that a lot, so do I, because you and I both have a tight line rig, a mono rig, in our hands quite often. And one of the best adjustments and the easiest adjustments to make that dramatically changes the drift is tight line dry dropper.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's as simple as that. The tight line dry dropper takes place on a tight line rig or a mono rig, or you may call it a Euro nymphing rig, whatever. It's best done at kind of short ranges. So it's not something you're going to throw huge 40, 50-foot casts and expect, a flawless presentation or even the ability to do so. It's a little bit more limited in that. But on the flip side, it provides incredible control.
Yeah.
We're used to managing a fly line often, like we talked about in these previous two styles, which causes drag pretty quickly if not managed correctly.
Yeah.
The great advantage to being on a tight line dry dropper is that drag, we get to lift the line off the water. And we're a straight line to that dry fly often, and then not too far away from that nymph. So when either one gets taken, we can connect really quickly. And it allows for just seamless presentations. It's so cool.
Yeah. I often feel like this is the style that allows me to present the flies almost equally as well.
Nice.
I'll do it because I see a few risers within range, like you said, not 50 feet, usually within 30 feet. Seriously, within 30 feet, often closer than that. And maybe I see a couple risers. And so I just throw that dry fly on. I keep the nymph on underneath. We should say we're throwing the dry fly below the sighter somewhere on the tippet. And I usually run mine on a tag. You could do it in line if running a tag makes you uncomfortable, but it's quick. It's quick. You just throw it on a tag. And that's where we're putting it. And we're going to walk through all the details of that. But like you said, the point is we can keep most, if not all, of the line off the water because we're running a tight line rig. And there's your tight line advantage. So you can get amazing, incredible drifts on the dry. And then, just fantastic drifts on the nymph too. It can be really effective for both flies.
And the other nice thing about this too is, if we're in the rhythm of fishing nymphs, or we've got our mono rig on, and that casting stroke that we've kind of built into that fundamental of fishing nymphs, we can do the same cast we were doing now with the dry fly up on the tag. And because of that range that we're fishing, we can hit that 30-foot or less circle or radius pretty easily with our standard nymph cast. Yeah,
I often show people this when I'm guiding. And it's funny because as soon as you throw a dry fly on, people want to change the cast and they start, throwing dry fly casts. Yeah, but like you say, it's really a nymphing cast. Nothing really changes. You're still tight line nymphing, and then all of a sudden the dry fly hits the surface, and then you let the dry lead the flies down one seam, the nymph down one seam. We'll get to all that in detail, right? But we're saying that the nymph is the priority, especially in the cast. And yet, like I said, man, you can get amazing drifts on the dry. And when they hit, you're connected immediately. Yeah. And it's a lot of fun.
And you can set that nymph up in so many different ways in the air before the fly hits the water on that dry dropper, tight line dry dropper rig that you simply can't do with the bobber style or the light dry dropper with the fly line.
With the standard.
There's a level of control available that you unlock when you can do those certain casting strokes in the air and manipulations of landing that fly where you want and how you want it, that you can get in the weeds all day long on that.
That is awesome. Yeah, especially if your leader's built for it. We've talked about that. That's one of the reasons I run what I call the standard Troutbitten mono rig, because it has power. And you can, if you run a thin or especially a micro thin leader, you will not have those placement options that you're talking about right there.
Yep,
that's true. Neat. I'm sure we'll get into that. That'll be episode 4. Okay. Anything else, Austin, in all these styles here? 1, 2, 3. Anything else?
Yeah, I think I would just touch on the point again that each of these 3 styles is equally important, and just the ability to realize when the style is changing, or when you get to the river and a style is necessary to cycle through these different methods of fishing a dry dropper until you find the one that meets your water type or whatever the fish tell you to do that day.
Nice.
And don't pigeonhole yourself into one of these styles, because you're going to be right 1/3 of the time maybe.
Yeah, or less, because there's about 100 other styles. You could throw streamers and everything else. I love it. Hey, this was fun. Right back to the compact delivery.
Feels good. Yep.
All right, so if you've never considered the differences in these dry dropper styles, then think on them for a while. Head out to the river with the goal of experimentation. Consider the differences and discover the strengths versus weaknesses of each rig and each presentation. Because fishing dry dropper can really mean a lot of things. And each one of these styles has many moments when it's the clear winner. So episode 2 of this skills series is a deep dive into fishing light dry dropper. Episode 3 covers standard dry dropper, and episode 4 covers tight line dry dropper. Then, in the 5th and last episode of this skills series, we'll bring back all of the Troutbitten guys for a roundtable discussion about all the stuff we're talking about. That'll be a good time.
I know.
Maybe Bill will have a whole different way of doing things. You think? Bill will say, there's not just 3.
We could start a pool. Yeah.
All right, until then, the next time someone talks about dry dropper fishing, ask them what style, because there's a lot of room for variety. Austin, will you read us out?
Yeah. All right. So remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 900 articles with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, currently featuring the Troutbitten Tip series and an ongoing series about fly fishing the monorig. These are short, useful, and unique tips for your fly fishing life. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave us a comment, because that really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.
Like it.
That felt fun.
We're good at this.
It's $12 an hour.
For you elitists out there, where the hell was I?
That feels good.
That's an added bonus.
That's enough.
Champion, champion.